What is the most bone-chilling, inconceivable thing a parent has done to you? My husband and I got married in 2002 and had our son, Brian, 10 months later. In May 2004, we welcomed our twin girls, Mary and Lisa. My family was beautiful. Every time I took a picture of us, we looked like the families in the stock photos you can Google. However, I can no longer look at the pictures of us because it makes my stomach churl. When my twin girls were born, we had no issues in the hospital. They were born right on their due date and passed all their postnatal tests with stellar stats. But when we got home, we noticed that Mary was developing a rash. I hadn't really dealt with allergies in kids since my son didn't have them, and neither did any child or adult in my entire family. I wasn't sure what it was. I thought that maybe she just had sensitive skin like me. It took 3 months to figure it out. During that time, her allergic reactions got more and more severe. Eventually, we figured out Mary was allergic to coconut. The doctors told us that it was a particularly rare allergen, so it wasn't on any of the skin test panels they ran. When we found out what she was allergic to, we were relieved. So relieved. You see, when I was a kid, my mother would put coconut oil in my hair all the time. It looked greasy as hell. I hated it, and once I was old enough to start doing my own hair, I never put that stuff in my hair again. Imagine the irony when I found out I had a daughter with a severe allergy to the one thing I hated my entire life. We told my mother, and she laughed as well. She made jokes about how my baby must have heard me talking about my hatred for coconut oil while she was still cooking inside me and decided that she needed to hate it too. We all had a good laugh and left it at that. Or so I thought. My mother and I have always had a contentious relationship at best. We got along well enough, but we vehemently disagreed on certain topics. As far as raising my kids, my mother was hands-off and respected all of my decisions, even if she didn't like them sometimes. The only thing she continually got on my case about was the coconut oil thing. You see, my girls had very textured and curly hair. It was a little on the rough side, and my mother always insisted that a little bit of oil would make the curls soft and more defined. I always said no. I cannot understand how she did what happened next. I was giving a midterm that day to my students, and I had to be at my research lab late that night. My husband was away at some conference, and our nanny was down with the flu. So, I had my mom come take them for the day. My son was almost 3 years old, and the girls were a year and a half old. Overnight visits with my parents weren't exactly common, but they weren't unusual either. They had always come back from these visits very happy and well taken care of, so I had no second thoughts about leaving them with my parents. They spoke to me on the phone after their lunch, and then, around 5 p.m., we video chatted. The kids were also happy and healthy. I got home around 10:30 p.m. that night and called my mom to see if the kids were up by any chance so I could say goodnight. I missed the kids by about 20 minutes. They'd already gone to bed. So, I talked to my mom for a little bit, but she's a pretty early sleeper too, so we hung up and went to bed. I woke up around 5 a.m. the next morning to go pick up my husband from the airport at 6. I picked up my husband, and neither one of us was very hungry yet, so we thought it'd be a nice treat to pick up the kids first and go to brunch with my parents. We got to my parents' house at 7:45 a.m. My parents weren't there. My son was at the neighbor's house and ran outside with the neighbor as soon as he saw his daddy and me pull up. He was hysterical and crying, and I couldn't calm him down. My blood pressure was rising because now I'm thinking that something horrible had happened to my parents. My neighbor tells me that she isn't sure what's happening, but there was an ambulance at my parents' house at 6 a.m. My dad had run over and woken them up to see if they could watch my son for a few hours until he got back. Of course, they'd said yes. I'm calling my parents nonstop at this point, and I'm getting frantic because I don't know what's happened. My son was still crying, but he was calmer. He still couldn't really explain to me what had happened, though. I honestly don't remember the details of what happened next, but somehow we figured out that the ambulance was from a hospital nearby. We broke several driving laws trying to get there. We got to the hospital, pulled into the emergency entrance that was for ambulances only, left the car, and bolted inside. A few nurses took notice of us immediately and were asking us what was wrong. I was calmer than my husband at this point, so I explained that I didn't know. I told her my twin girls and my parents were here somewhere. I'll never forget the look on that nurse's face. She knew exactly who I was at that moment, and she was about to cry. Another nurse took me and my husband to an empty room. They asked us to calm down and listen to the doctor before we went to find my family. My mother had put coconut oil in both my daughter's hair when they were playing the previous day before bed. The girls loved it when my mom did their hair, so they had asked for braids, and my mom accepted. She put coconut oil in both their hair because it would make for smoother braids. According to my son, Mary started to get a little dizzy and itchy when my mom was doing her hair. So my mom gave her some kids' Benadryl, which made her sleepy. Since it was close to bedtime anyways, the kids then went to bed. Giving her Benadryl was something we did whenever she had a mild reaction, since it usually meant she accidentally came across some coconut from a secondary source. We also showered her from head to toe immediately to erase any lingering traces of it. My mother simply gave her some Benadryl, kept the coconut oil in her hair and put her to sleep. The Benadryl made her sleepy and unable to wake up or be conscious enough to wake up her brother or cry. She vomited in her sleep, and the rash spread all over. Her little body was swollen to twice the size. She had asphyxiated in her sleep. She died painfully and slowly in the early hours of the morning. My mother had found her when she went to check on the kids in the morning around 7 a.m. She was already dead by then. My mother screamed, called for my dad, and that's when they went to the hospital. My dad hadn't known about the coconut oil until my mom explained. To this day, I've never seen my father so angry. At the hospital, he was unable to look at my mother, out of fury, or me, out of shame. They had rushed to the hospital hoping there was some way to save Mary and to get Lisa checked out immediately since he thought she might have a mild allergy as well. I can't even explain to you the emotions my husband and I felt. I remember seeing my little girl and just being in denial. There was no way that she was gone. This had to be a horrible, horrible nightmare. The following days, the funeral, and explaining to my other kids what had happened are events I still can't talk about. It just breaks a part of me. My mother was investigated, as was my entire family. I almost lost my kids to my country's version of CPS once because they thought my kids were in danger. My husband and I had to fight tooth and nail to show that uprooting them during this time would be the worst thing for them. My mother was never arrested. My father did leave her, though they're not officially divorced. It's been 13 years. Brian just got his license this year, and Lisa is going to start high school soon. Both of them are healthy and turning into amazing adults. I don't think I could ever recover from the loss of my daughter. We miss her so much.